Good morning. While the 6-week face-off in Galwan was supposed to be de-escalating, 20 Indian soldiers, including a colonel, were shot as tensions seemed to be getting out of hand by the day. This is the first time in 45 years that you've actually had combat casualties, and it's not clear by how much, but reports suggest that China has taken control of parts of the territory that India had been controlling since 1962. It's not quite clear what exactly set off the current round of Chinese aggression. China has obviously been very upset ever since India converted Ladakh into a union territory and had abrogated Article 370. But whether the aggression was due to that or whether it's due to the Chinese desire to take the world attention away from Corona, or whether it's just a larger Chinese muscle flexing, if you look at what's happened in Hong Kong, if you look at what's happening in the South China Sea, and its increasing tensions with the United States. So we'll have to see whether the situation in Galwan gets worse, but predictably in India, talk is around what India can do to prevent Chinese investments in India and what India can do to control the $50 to $55 billion trade deficit with China. You'd recall that in April, People's Bank of China bought 1.5% of investment in HDFC Bank. The government of India changed the rules to try and restrict Chinese investment. So Chinese investment in India is not much, but the question is where it goes in. A paper by Gateway House, for example, had pointed out some months ago that $4 billion of Chinese investment has come into the major Indian unicorns. So the big ones are Alibaba put about $900 million in Paytm, $500 million in Snapdeal along with SoftBank and Foxconn. It put $400 million in, Tencent put $400 million in Ola. So there's lots of investment like that that comes to mind. A Brookings paper, in fact, talks about how there are 800 Chinese enterprises that are working in India. And a lot of the Chinese power, the equipment that companies like Anil Ambani's companies, for example, bought from Chinese power suppliers was funded by liberal Chinese creditor. There's a company called Dongfang, which has got 28,000 megawatts of power projects in India, and it's going to set up a production facility here with about an investment of about $2 billion. A lot of talk of trying to stop that or boycotting Chinese goods, banning imports. It's not quite clear. We've addressed this issue in the past, and we've said that it's just not sustainable. The bulk of mobile phones sold in India, for example, right now, are made in China. And even those which are made in India, actually the bulk of their components are brought in from China. In fact, we saw when the pandemic started that major Indian production, like the pharmaceuticals, for example, actually got stopped because the bulk of the API was imported from China. So, while we wait and watch and see how this situation in the LSE gets controlled, I think this talk of boycotting China is completely misplaced. Basically, India's policy over the last 70 years have made it uncompetitive. So a boycott cannot be sustained. In the case of pharma, for example, it is our insistence on price controls that exported our API market to China. So unless we fix that, it's unlikely that the API market will come back. Even if you ban Chinese imports, Chinese exports, they'll be smuggled in, they'll come in through third countries like Vietnam. In the 1980s, don't forget, when India had very, very high duties on acrylic fiber and other synthetic textiles, Chinese imports used to flood the market. If Prime Minister Modi or any Indian politician for that matter wants to battle China, you have to free up the economy. In fact, not freeing up the economy is also giving China a big boost in military terms. China's massive GDP growth over the last many decades has meant that China's defense budget is $250 billion. India is about $50 or $60 billion. Basically, China spends less of its GDP on defense, but because the GDP is so large, it gets a big boost. The big Corona story, of course, today is the use of a cortisone, of a steroid, to cure Corona. This is part of the recovery trial that was looking at drugs, including HCQ. And Moderna, whose vaccine is in the second stage of trials, has said that by November or December, the vaccine should be ready for distribution. Other Corona stories, it's not just Delhi that's accused of fudging its numbers. Mumbai has just added 862 people to its Corona death. That takes its death rate from 3.8 to 5.2%. That's truly frightening. More so when you keep in mind the fact that Bombay's hospitals are struggling to keep up with the number of patients coming in. The iconic Taj Mansingh has been converted into a Corona care center. Now the problem is, we've discussed in the case of the other hotels as well, that these hotels can at best be quarantine centers for people with mild symptoms. As far as the real beds are concerned, the hospital beds, Delhi will need those, and those cannot be those cannot be got by converting, hotels. So Delhi Chief Minister Kejriwal and Home Minister Amit Shah will have to do a lot more, and let's see what they do. While Prime Minister Modi has talked about green shoots, we have our lead article by JP Morgan's Sajid Chanoy, who has a very interesting angle on it. He essentially says that Standard & Poor and Moody's had a similar sort of outlook for FY21 and FY22. But the big difference in their outlook is because they both have a very different medium-term outlook. And the reason why they have a very different medium-term outlook is really about the financial sector. If banks are not recapitalized quickly, and frankly that's not happening right now, if banks are not going to be recapitalized quickly, their ability to fund the rest of the economy is going to be severely constrained. So, so that's the point that we're making, that you need overall reform to happen if the economy is going to grow in a sustained manner. All this talk of green shoots is frankly, it's just a waste of time. And it's difficult to understand what green shoots means when till June 15 the data was just out. You're finding that direct taxes were down about a third and advanced taxes were down 75%. So it's difficult to understand what the Prime Minister was talking about. Arunabha Ghosh has an interesting op-ed on the MSME sector. While most people talk about greater credit and other such things for the MSME sector, Arunabha basically talks about the role of increasing power sector efficiency. And a big interesting corporate story is that Amul is just going to get into the branded atta segment. We've seen how in the case of, whether it's milk or dairy, chocolates, how brands like Amul and even Mother Dairy have given a run to big Indian brands, to big multinational brands. So we've got to see whether they're able to do the same thing as far as atta is concerned. Of course, this also means that the Amul girl will not only have to give lines on butter, she'll now be giving lines on wheat. Utterly delicious is how I describe it. Thank you. Have a great day.